I'm Jessica, a decorated Air Force captain with 17 years of discipline hardened into my bones, and yet a single letter from my mother shattered me more than basic training ever could. Years ago, she sent me away with cold eyes and a lie wrapped in maternal calm. Now I'm returning home for Christmas, but instead of comfort, I uncover a plan so heartless it makes my childhood pain look merciful. Before we dive in, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments below. Let's go back to where it began. It was winter in Raleigh and I was 16, raw, furious, sobbing into my sleeve at the Amtrak station. My duffel bag was heavier than my heart, but barely. My mother stood 3 feet away, stone-faced in her wool coat, not even pretending to cry. She said, "This is best for all of us," and her voice sliced through me sharper than the wind. My father didn't say a word. He looked at his shoes. I begged, I cried, I screamed. No one flinched. That night, they sent me to military school. I don't remember the train ride, just the sound of my heartbeat, loud and betrayed as North Carolina blurred past the window. 17 years later, I've earned medals, flown jets, stared down chaos with a calm they could never give me. But none of that made me ready for this. When I emailed my mom last week and said I'd be coming home for Christmas, I wanted, foolishly maybe, some sign that things had changed. Her reply. Just the letter K, no punctuation. No warmth, no curiosity, just that single, jagged consonant. I stared at the screen of my laptop in the Fort Bragg dorm, my finger hovering over the trackpad. The hum of fluorescent lights above me grew louder somehow, buzzing in time with the heat crawling up my neck. That was it. After years of silence, distance, missed birthdays, and medals she never acknowledged. K, my stomach flipped. Was it permission, a warning, a dismissal? I slammed the laptop shut harder than I meant to. The air in my room, so familiar, so sterile, felt like it was shrinking. I'd flown halfway around the world to evacuate civilians under fire, but the idea of spending Christmas in Charlotte with my family made my hands tremble. Why did I even want to go? Because somewhere deep down, a part of me still hoped that home could mean something. That maybe this year, things would feel different. Stupid, right? It's funny how you can fly supersonic aircraft, sit in rooms with generals, and still revert to a little girl who just wanted her mom to love her right. I stood and walked to the small mirror above my locker. My face looked tired, tense, like I'd been bracing for impact since that K hit my inbox. But I had made my decision. I was going home. I tried not to overthink the K. I told myself it was just how she texts, that maybe Mom's coldness was just efficiency. A generational quirk, a product of stress, but we both knew better. Still, I wasn't going home with anger in my heart. Not yet. I wanted to believe in something else. So the next morning, I pulled on jeans and a cozy knit sweater, civvies that always felt strangely unfamiliar after weeks in uniform, and headed to the base commissary in Fort Bragg. It was December 12th. The aisles were already bursting with red bows and plastic pine needles. Christmas music crackled from overhead speakers, all jingle bells and artificially chipper cheer. Kids in puffer coats squealed over candy canes. Couples argued gently over ham versus turkey. And me? I was wandering the toy aisle with a cart full of well-wrapped hope. For my niece Sophie, I picked a pink karaoke machine shaped like a unicorn. She was 6 now, loved to sing, even if her pitch was catastrophic. For Max, my nephew, who was turning 9 in February, a Lego fighter jet. It reminded me of the real one I flew, and I smiled thinking about his little fingers piecing it together, eyes wide like mine used to be. The smile faded fast. Would he even remember me? I hadn't been home in 3 years. And my sister Megan, well, we exchanged fewer words in a decade than 2 strangers stuck in an elevator might manage. I added a stack of gourmet chocolates and a bottle of imported olive oil to the cart, Mom's favorite brand. I remembered her using it in the kitchen once, murmuring, "Even soldiers need flavor," when she caught me dipping bread into the bottle. That was before she turned me into the family's scapegoat, before the train. I shook the memory off and turned down the spice aisle, adding saffron, cardamom, and cloves. I was going to cook Christmas dinner, roasted duck with wine-poached pears, scalloped potatoes with rosemary, fresh bread from scratch. A table full of things we never had growing up. I wanted to believe it would matter, That they'd see me. Not the soldier, not the girl they once sent away, but me. The daughter who still came home. It was snowing lightly by the time I loaded everything into the trunk of my Corolla. Boxes stacked with precision, each tag handwritten. I sat in the driver's seat a moment longer than necessary, staring through the windshield as the flakes danced like ash across the hood. What if I was wrong? What if the K really was all the welcome I was going to get? I closed my eyes and imagined the smell of cinnamon in the air, Max's arms around my waist, Sophie singing terribly but smiling so hard her cheeks puffed. I imagined Megan smiling too, genuinely. And Mom, well, even just a warm glance. I needed to believe, because if I didn't, what was I even going home for? Back in my dorm, I packed carefully. Folded sweaters and scarves, dresses I'd never worn on base, perfume I rarely used but still bought every Christmas like some kind of ritual. I included the silk navy blouse that had won me compliments during last year's officers' banquet. Maybe Mom would notice. Maybe she'd say something kind. Maybe Megan would ask where I got it. Maybe, hope's a funny thing. You'd think war would harden you against it. But it's not the battlefield that breaks you, it's the dinner table. The empty chair. The way people who raised you can act like you're a guest in your own story. As I zipped the suitcase, I caught my reflection again in the corner mirror. Same eyes. Same quiet hope I'd carried all my life. And just like that 16-year-old girl sobbing at the Raleigh station, I whispered something no one could hear. Please let it be different this time. December 20th. The sky over Charlotte was that dull, uncommitted gray that doesn't snow. It just sulks. As I pulled up to the house I hadn't seen in years, I realized my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. My breath clouded the windshield while the engine ticked in protest. I could see the front windows glowing faintly. There was life inside, technically. But warmth, that would remain to be seen. Megan's SUV was in the driveway, its bumper half hanging off like always. Mom's car was parked precisely 2 feet from the garage, close enough to show control, far enough to keep the neighbors guessing. It was strange how, even after all these years, every detail of this place still felt like an emotional landmine. I parked on the street, out of habit or maybe caution. I gathered the wrapped gifts, bags of groceries, a small carry-on, and walked up the porch steps. The wood still creaked on the third one. My heart creaked louder. I knocked twice, soft but sure. The door opened abruptly. Megan. Her hair was longer than I remembered, but the look she gave me was the same one from high school, vaguely annoyed like I'd interrupted something. Jess, she said flatly. Her phone stayed in her hand. Her eyes didn't. I smiled, though I felt it wobble. Hey, Meg. You made it, she mumbled, stepping aside. Don't let the cold in, Sophie's sick. And that was my grand welcome. Inside, the house was tidy but sterile. The living room smelled like synthetic pine and cinnamon, not the warm spices I remembered from childhood. A pre-lit tree stood in the corner, partially decorated, an effort abandoned halfway through. I set the gifts gently at its base. Each tag bore careful handwriting and ribbons I'd tied myself. No one commented. From the kitchen, I heard Mom call out, "You're early." Not welcome home, not we missed you, just a timestamp. She appeared a moment later, wiping her hands on a towel, eyes sweeping over me without stopping. You look fit, she said, then walked past to the pantry. I watched her open a box of crackers like it was more important than my arrival. I carried the groceries into the kitchen, placing the bags on the counter. I thought I'd cook Christmas dinner, I said brightly. I brought duck, fresh herbs, even saffron. Mom peeked into one of the bags. That's expensive, you didn't need to do all this. I shrugged. I wanted to. She didn't reply. Later at dinner we sat in silence mostly. Mom served spaghetti and jarred sauce, not that I minded, but it wasn't exactly festive. Tom, Megan's husband, talked about inflation like he was auditioning for cable news. Gas is ridiculous, he grumbled, glancing at me. Guess you don't have to worry about that, huh? I smiled politely. Military covers a lot, but we still pay for gas, Tom. Well, still, he said, looking at the gifts beside the tree. Looks like Christmas came early for us. His tone was light, but his eyes weren't. Megan piled noodles onto Sophie's plate, then looked at my coat, the Gucci one I'd saved up for during my last deployment. Guess the Air Force pays well, she muttered. I sipped my water. It pays in ways money can't fix. Silence. No one asked about my work. No one asked how I got leave approved or what my plans were. Instead, they passed bread and shared inside jokes I wasn't part of. I cleared the dishes when we were done. Mom didn't stop me, and then came the final blow. As I carried dessert plates to the sink, Megan called from the hallway, "Oh, forgot to mention, you'll be sleeping in the living room." I turned slowly. "The couch! The air mattress," she said. "Tom pumped it up already." I blinked. "There are 3 bedrooms upstairs." "Yeah, but Max and Sophie each need their own." "You get it, right? They don't sleep well together. Routine is important." Of course it is, for them, for me. A leaking air mattress in a drafty room where the only light came from the microwave clock. I said nothing, just nodded and smiled. Later that night, I unrolled my gear quietly, setting up camp like I had in more hostile territories than this. But this was worse. The humiliation wasn't loud, it was quiet, domestic, plausibly deniable. They hadn't said anything cruel, they just offered me nothing. The air mattress hissed as it deflated slowly under me, a perfect metaphor for the evening. From the hallway, I heard Megan laughing at something on TV. From upstairs, Sophie coughed. And from within me, the teenage version of myself screamed. Why had I come? What was I even trying to prove? That I still belonged here, that they'd changed. No one had asked why I brought gifts, or tried to cook, or drove 5 hours in the snow. They just took it all as expected, as if generosity from me was some kind of tax they were owed. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how I'd built a life in the military where my presence meant something, where people noticed if I was gone. And here, in the house that raised me, I was treated like an afterthought. Even now, a part of me hoped it would shift, that maybe tomorrow would be better, that maybe this was just the awkward day-one vibe of a family long out of practice. But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't home. I was back where the wound began. By the 3rd night, my air mattress had lost enough air to feel like sleeping on a water balloon. Every morning, I woke with a stiff back and a polite smile, telling myself to endure. It was only a few more days until Christmas, only a few more nights until the dinner I'd planned so carefully. Hope had become a ritual, something I wore like my uniform. That night, December 22nd, the house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional cough from upstairs. Tom was snoring. The children had gone to bed hours ago. The quiet felt like a reprieve. I needed water just to soothe my dry throat before trying to sleep again. The kitchen light glowed faintly under the doorway as I padded down the hallway in socks. My footsteps made no sound on the carpet, but voices, low, urgent, floated to me before I even reached the door. "After dinner on Christmas," Megan's voice hissed. "She'll be relaxed, full of wine, probably even grateful. That's when we'll do it." I froze mid-step. "Exactly," my mother's voice replied, smooth as ice. "Catch her in a good mood. She'll sign without asking too many questions." A chill raced down my spine. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. "Megan again. We need her signature. Without her credit, the bank won't approve. This is our only chance." "This is the only way we'll get approved. Her military credit will seal it," Mom said. The words landed like punches. Mortgage, approval, signature, military credit. They weren't just being thoughtless or rude. They had a plan for me. Behind the corner, my hands shook around the glass I was carrying. Water sloshed onto my palm, cold and sticky. "Do you think she suspects?" Megan whispered. "She's always been naive when it comes to family," my mother said lightly. "Give her some nostalgia, some praise about her service, a few tears. She'll sign anything." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted iron. I had spent days telling myself they didn't mean to hurt me, that the coldness was just awkwardness, that they hadn't changed but maybe they still cared. Now I knew better. This wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. I wanted to burst into the kitchen, slam the glass down, demand to know how they could use me like this. But I stayed where I was, pressed against the hallway wall, my breath shallow. Years of military discipline kept me still, silent, invisible. They were using my hope as bait, my dignity as collateral. "Remember Christmas night," Mom said. "No guilt trips before then, just warmth. She always wanted a family, give her the performance." They both laughed softly, not cruelly, just matter of fact. Like 2 people planning a sales pitch, my hands trembled. The glass slipped a little. I caught it before it hit the floor. my reflexes faster than my emotions. Tears burned my eyes but refused to fall. I backed away slowly, step by step, retreating down the hallway like it was enemy territory. The carpet muffled my movement, the same way it muffled the screaming 16-year-old in my chest. Back in the living room, I sat on the deflating mattress, clutching the glass to my chest. The water inside rippled like my pulse. They weren't just indifferent. They were predators with polite smiles. My own mother and sister. 1,000 memories flickered. Megan borrowing my sweaters without asking, Mom sighing at my accomplishments, the way they'd all but exiled me to military school and called it structure. Little rehearsals for this moment. I stared at the ceiling fan above me, its blades motionless, and felt something inside me shift, not a snap but a pivot, like a compass needle finding true north. I would not sign anything. I would not be bait. I would not play the grateful guest in my own family's con. But I didn't rush into action. Not yet. Years of strategy told me, knowledge is power, but only if you hold it until the right moment. They thought they were planning a performance for me. They didn't know I had already heard the script. I lay there in the dim glow of the microwave clock, replaying every word I'd heard, committing it to memory like coordinates on a map. My breathing slowed. My tears dried. My mind sharpened. By the time the house settled into true silence again, I wasn't just the girl on the air mattress anymore. I was the woman who had flown jets, planned evacuations, led teams under fire. I had been ambushed before and survived. I could survive this. But more than that, I could reclaim my dignity. I reached for my phone under the pillow, thumb hovering over the screen. Not to text them. Not yet. Just to remind myself of the contact who always replied, the one place I had never been treated like a tool, my base, my other family. For the first time since arriving, my heart slowed enough to let me think. Christmas night was their plan. What would mine be? The next morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and peppermint-flavored coffee creamer, cheap, overly sweet, and nothing like the Christmas scents I'd imagined. Megan sat at the counter scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up when I passed her. Neither did Mom, who was humming off-key as she wiped down the stove. It was like the whispering in the kitchen never happened. But I remembered. Every word. I poured a cup of coffee without saying anything, pretending I hadn't seen the way Megan's gaze darted to the corner of the counter, where a neat stack of legal papers now sat tucked beneath a Christmas-themed folder. My name was printed neatly on the top sheet. I recognized it from a distance. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. After breakfast, I retreated to the living room, sat quietly on the edge of the slowly sagging air mattress, and pulled out my phone. My fingers hesitated, then tapped open a message window to someone I trusted without hesitation. To Commander Ellison, hi, sir. Just wondering any chance the guest wing is open over the holidays. I didn't expect a reply right away, but it came back within minutes. Ellison, are you kidding? You're always welcome home, Jess. We'll save you a plate and a bunk. Want me to send someone to pick you up? I stared at those words. You're always welcome home, and something in my chest gave way. Not tears, not rage. Just a quiet warmth I hadn't felt since stepping foot in this house. I typed back, thanks. I'll be heading back tomorrow. I'll drive. Need the road time. Megan walked in holding Sophie, who had finally warmed up to me enough to let me read her a story the night before. Sophie's feeling better, Megan said, still not quite meeting my eyes. She'll want to open presents early if you're not staying through the 25th. Oh, I asked, my voice neutral. Tom said you mentioned something about base duty coming up, she probed. I smiled, polite and impenetrable. Yeah, they called me in, can't be helped. Not a complete lie, but not the truth either. I began gathering my things that afternoon, folding my clothes quietly, placing my coat in the garment bag with care. I packed the empty toy boxes I'd brought for Max and Sophie, gifts they now claimed with barely a thank you, and wrapped up the gourmet ingredients I had planned to cook with. Those wouldn't be needed anymore. You're leaving tomorrow? Mom asked, almost absent-mindedly. I nodded. Yeah, early, base needs me. She didn't protest, didn't ask why, didn't say she'd miss me. I guess that told me everything. Later that evening, I sat alone in the living room, the tree lights twinkling gently behind me, and thought about the girl who used to sleep in that room. The one who had once believed her family would come around if she just tried harder, bought the right gifts, cooked the perfect meal, made them proud. That girl didn't live here anymore. I looked at the folder Megan had left on the dining table, still unopened. I walked over, picked it up, held it for a moment, then calmly slipped it into my duffel bag. They wouldn't get their signature, but I wanted them to know I saw them, and I wasn't fooled anymore. The next morning, I loaded everything into my car before sunrise. The house was still. No one came to say goodbye. As I slid behind the wheel and turned the ignition, I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I just drove. The road stretched long and empty ahead, lined with frosted trees and pale light breaking over the horizon. With every mile I put between us, I felt the weight of that house lifting. And for the first time in days, I could breathe. It was still early when I pulled through the gates at Fort Bragg, but the morning light had already turned golden, glinting off the frost-dusted ground like quiet applause. The guard at the checkpoint spotted me, then grinned like he'd just seen an old friend. "Captain Adams," he said, tilting his head. "Home for Christmas." "Home," I said, and for the first time in days, the word didn't feel like a lie. As I drove through base, the familiar grid of buildings, the lines of trees bowing in the wind, and the quiet rhythm of duty returned to me like muscle memory. It didn't matter that it was the holidays. The base was alive, steady, reassuring. I parked behind the guest wing barracks where a cluster of fairy lights hung between two poles, swaying softly in the wind. The welcome committee. 2 sergeants and an old friend from tech school, staff SGT. Amelia Holt waiting on the steps, holding paper cups of cocoa like sentinels of comfort. "You made it," Amelia said, pulling me into a hug that was all warmth and no pretense. "I saved you the last decent bed. Hope you're okay with the corner unit." "I'd sleep in a broom closet right now," I laughed. She didn't ask why I was back early. She didn't need to. Inside, the barracks were humming with off-duty chatter, the clatter of someone setting up a poker game, and holiday music that actually made me smile. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was honest. "Hey, Captain," a younger airman called as I passed. "You back on shift?" "Not officially," I said, waving, "but I'll cook if someone buys real eggs." Laughter followed me down the hall. In my room, small but clean, with crisp sheets and a tiny fake Christmas tree on the desk, I unpacked slowly. No one would assign me chores here. No one would guilt me into signing anything. No one expected gifts, just presents. And presents here was enough. Later that night, the base hosted its annual charity toy drive. I hadn't even remembered it was that day until I stepped into the mess hall and saw the long tables lined with donated gifts, all waiting to be wrapped and sent to local shelters. Without hesitation, I carried in the 2 extra toys I'd brought, 1 unicorn karaoke machine, 1 fighter jet Lego set, and added them to the pile. I didn't need to see Sophie or Max open them to know they were going somewhere they'd be loved. Around me, soldiers and staff moved like one big, messy, unified family. There were hugs and teasing and shared stories about botched recipes and surprise deployments. I was handed a steaming mug of cider and a slice of lopsided cake. No one expected me to perform. No one judged my coat. And when someone asked where I'd been, I just said, "Long story, but I'm good now." That night, alone in my bunk with the soft hum of heaters in the background, I opened my laptop, not to check on family emails, but to do something I'd been thinking about for days. I drafted a message to my father. It wasn't long. It wasn't angry, just something honest. "Hi, Dad. I came home for Christmas hoping to reconnect." What I found reminded me why I left. But I think there's still part of me that wants to believe we can have a real conversation. "When you're ready, so am I." I stared at the screen, hovering over the send button. Then I saved it as a draft. Some messages aren't meant to be sent right away. Sometimes writing it is enough. Christmas Eve crept in softly. There were no loud traditions here, no fake sentiment, no orchestrated dinners or forced photo ops, just quiet companionship. Laughter in the common room, a shared warmth that didn't demand anything in return. I'd spent the day helping Amelia and a few others wrap gifts for the shelter drop-offs. Someone played soft jazz over a Bluetooth speaker. People floated in and out of the mess hall all day, offering cookies, odd jokes, or just sitting in silence. No one asked personal questions they weren't ready to hear the answers to. And yet, I had never felt so seen. By evening, the base was quiet. I curled up on the couch in the rec room beside a few others, sipping cider and listening to Amelia read from a battered copy of A Christmas Carol. It was funny how the words about ghosts and regret felt so strangely fitting. Halfway through the reading, my phone buzzed. One new message. I pulled it out casually, not expecting much. It was from my mother. "Where are you? Dinner in an hour, that was it. No, we miss you. No, are you okay?" Just a text, as if I were a roommate late for a calendar event. No acknowledgement that I'd left days ago. No mention of the folder they'd tried to slip in front of me. Just the usual cold, clipped, transactional. For a moment, I stared at the screen. And then, without hesitation, I tapped out my reply. "I'm home. With my family." I attached the photo I'd just taken, me and Amelia, smiling beneath the little plastic tree, cocoa mugs in hand. In the background, 3 airmen were building a gingerbread house that had already collapsed twice and looked more like a sugar tornado than anything else. I sent the message. No hesitation, no second draft, just truth. My thumb hovered over the chat for a few seconds longer. I could see the read status pop up. I waited, but there was no response, not a single word. And strangely, I didn't feel the usual sting, not this time. Instead, I leaned back into the couch, tucked my legs under the blanket Amelia had brought from the laundry room, and let my heart settle into something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was something quieter, something heavier and lighter at once. They hadn't changed. They never intended to, but I had. I thought about all the years I'd tried to prove my worth. The medals I sent pictures of that went unacknowledged. The promotions no one asked about. The birthdays they missed. And yet I'd still believed that showing up with gifts and duck confit would somehow rewrite the past. It wouldn't, and now I wasn't going to beg for belonging anymore. "Want to decorate the cake?" Amelia asked, nudging me with a can of green icing. I grinned. "As long as you let me draw tactical frosting formations." "You're lucky I like you," she laughed, handing it over. So that's how I spent Christmas Eve. Not as a daughter trying to earn love, but as a woman who finally understood where her love was truly returned. The lights in the mess hall twinkled softly above us, flickering over faces that had seen war, grief, absurdity, and still made space for joy. For me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a soldier out of place. I felt home. Christmas morning was slow, peaceful, and wrapped in the kind of stillness that made you feel like time had taken a breath. I woke to the smell of cinnamon rolls, Amelia's grandmother's recipe, she said, and laughter drifting down the hallway. Someone had swapped the base's playlist from jazz to Mariah Carey, and no one even pretended to be annoyed. I was halfway through frosting a lopsided cupcake when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a call from the base gate. "This is Sergeant Coates, ma'am," came the voice on the line. "There's a man here asking for you, says he's your father, he's in dress uniform and, well, he looks upset." My blood ran cold. For a moment I couldn't speak. "Did he say what it was about?" "No, ma'am, just said it's urgent. Should I send him away?" I paused. "No," I said quietly. "Tell him I'll meet him at the gate." I didn't rush. I changed into my service jacket and jeans, no uniform, but I needed structure. Something to contain the storm I could already feel rising in my chest. The walk to the gate was long and wide open. No shadows to hide in, no walls to brace against. And there he was, my father, standing ramrod straight, hair now more silver than brown, holding his cover in his hand like it was part of a ritual he wasn't sure how to complete. He turned at the sound of my boots. For a second, we just looked at each other. It had been years since we'd spoken more than a polite nod. Even longer since we'd had a real conversation. I waited for him to speak first. "I went home this morning," he said finally, his voice dry and tight. "Your mother said you left early. Megan wouldn't tell me anything, just looked guilty." I didn't move. "And I found the paperwork," he said, pulling a crumpled folder from beneath his coat. "They said you agreed that you were going to co-sign, that you offered." His voice cracked slightly. "I believed them," he added lower now, "because I wanted to." A gust of wind passed between us. I didn't speak, just let the silence stretch like a wound finally breathing. But then I opened the folder, he continued, stepping closer. There was nothing, just blank forms and your name already typed, already used. He swallowed hard. I drove here because I had to see if they were lying, or if you had just walked away. His eyes met mine. And now I see, you walked away because they lied. I nodded once. He looked stricken, like something in him had collapsed without permission. You didn't even argue, he said, voice thick. You didn't throw a fit, you didn't demand anything, you just left. What else was there to do? I said quietly. They already decided what I was good for. He didn't answer that. Instead, he stepped forward and held the folder out to me. I didn't know, he said, and I hate that I didn't know. I think maybe, I said, you didn't want to know. His face crumpled just slightly. You're right. We stood there a long moment, two people with years between them, more absence than connection, but something beginning to shift. Do you want to come in? I asked softly, unsure why the words came out. He nodded. If you'll let me. I waved to Coates to open the gate. As we walked side by side across the frost-dusted pavement, I noticed how his steps weren't quite as steady anymore. Age had crept in, so had guilt. We sat outside the base canteen on a cold bench, sipping hot coffee in paper cups, neither of us really knowing what to say. I always thought you didn't need me, he said at last. You were the strong one, the one who never cried, the one who didn't fall apart when we sent you to that school. I cried, I said, just not where you could see it. He looked down. I let your mother control too much, he admitted. I told myself it was easier that way, that it kept peace, but it didn't. It broke things quietly. I watched him, the man who had stood silent at that train station, who had turned away while I begged to stay. I thought, he said, voice cracking, you didn't need defending, that maybe I didn't know how. My throat tightened. I didn't need defending, I said. I needed a dad. That did it. His face folded into his hands, not a dramatic sob, just a quiet, broken apology whispered into shaking fingers. I didn't touch him. I didn't tell him it was okay. But I didn't walk away either. For the first time, he wasn't silent to keep peace. He was silent because he was finally listening. We sat in silence for a while. The bench beneath us had begun to chill through my jeans, and the coffee in my hands had gone lukewarm. Still, I didn't move. Neither did he. The old him would have filled the silence with small talk, asked about work, maybe commented on the weather. But not this time. This time, my father just sat. I used to think, he said finally, that keeping the peace meant staying quiet, that if I just let your mother run things, the family would stay intact. I stared straight ahead at the frozen grass outside the canteen. And it did, technically. No fights, no broken dishes. But what good is a peaceful house if no one inside it feels safe? His voice was so quiet, I barely heard it. I always thought you were the strong one, he said again, like saying it twice might somehow make it true. You never asked for anything, never needed handouts. Your sister, she always demanded the spotlight, but you just kept getting back up. I gave a soft laugh, but it didn't carry humor. I didn't keep getting up because I was strong, I said. I kept getting up because no one was coming for me. That made him blink. His hands tightened around the paper cup. I should have come, he said, voice rough. When they sent you to that school, when Megan took your room. When your mother said things no mother should say, I saw it, all of it. I just told myself you'd be fine. But you didn't really believe that, did you? I asked. He didn't answer, not right away. No, he admitted. But I needed to believe it because if I accepted the truth, then I'd have to admit I failed you. He looked at me directly then. I failed you, Jess. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't coded in excuses, just raw, unflinching truth. And it landed in the space between us like a match dropped in a dry forest. Not a fire, but the beginning of one. I can't undo what I let happen, he continued. But I can choose differently now. That's why I'm here. That's why I left the house this morning and didn't look back. They used your name, your record, your future, and I was supposed to co-sign it too. I was supposed to help. I turned to face him slowly. Were you going to? I almost did, he said. But then I saw the blank signature line, and I remembered the look on your face the day we sent you away. How you cried, not because you were afraid, but because we didn't even ask what you wanted. That silence between us stretched again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like a bridge. I want to be better, he said. Not just sorry. I didn't have an easy answer for that. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. I'd spent years building armor around that old wound, and letting him in meant unlocking doors I wasn't sure were safe. But I could tell the difference now between the people who said what I wanted to hear and the people who meant what they said. And he meant it. That much I believed. When I was 16, I said slowly, I waited for you to stop me at the train station. I kept thinking you'd come running after me, that you'd say it was all a mistake. I waited for myself to do that too, he whispered. We both smiled then, small, tired, but real. I'm not asking for a clean slate, he said. I just want a seat at the table, even if it's at the far end. I looked at him and nodded. Not everything was healed, but something was beginning to unfreeze. That evening he left with a promise he was going to handle things, not in secret, not behind closed doors, but out in the open. I can't fix this by myself, he said. But I can start by telling the truth. As he pulled out of the base in his old truck, I stood by the gate for a moment longer than I needed to. I wasn't waiting for anything. I was just feeling the stillness. This time it wasn't hollow. It was peace. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard about it in fragments, through texts from a cousin I barely spoke to and a photo my aunt accidentally included in a group message. A photo where half the family sat frozen around a long table, mouths half open, eyes wide. Like a scene caught just after the first bomb dropped. Because in a way, it had. My father did something I never thought I'd witness. Not just stand up to my mother, but do it in front of everyone. December 25th. Christmas dinner. The dining room I'd grown up in was decked out for the holiday. Golden chargers, crystal goblets we weren't allowed to touch as kids, even the embroidered napkins Mom saved for proper occasions. Megan wore a red dress and her usual smug grin. My mother had on pearls and lipstick, her armor. They had the mortgage folder laid out on the corner of the buffet. My name pre-typed, still unsigned. What they didn't expect was the man who walked in, not with his head bowed, not with that quiet compliance he wore like a second skin, but with resolve. He came in full dress uniform. When my cousin texted me, that was the first thing she mentioned. Your dad looked like he was about to command a battlefield. He stood behind his chair, didn't sit, didn't even take off his gloves at first. They said Jessica had already agreed, he announced, loud enough to silence forks and chew-stuffed mouths. That she offered to co-sign, that she was happy to help. Megan blinked. She did. She didn't, he cut in. My mother narrowed her eyes. What are you doing? What I should have done 20 years ago, he said. Stand up for her. He reached into his coat and pulled out the folder, held it up like evidence. This is manipulation, he said, and it stops now. Someone dropped a fork. Max asked what was going on. Sophie started to cry. Megan tried to deflect. It's just a form, Dad. We didn't force anything. You tried to exploit your sister, he said. You watched her drive home with her arms full of gifts, with nothing but kindness in her heart, and you saw opportunity, not family, opportunity. My mother stood, the chair legs scraping across the floor. I did what had to be done, she snapped. This family needs support, and she has it. She owes. She owes you nothing, he said, louder now. She already gave you more than you ever deserved. The room cracked open. Uncle stopped chewing. A cousin grabbed her coat. Megan started crying, but not the kind that comes from remorse. No, hers was frustration. You're choosing her over us, she shouted. I'm choosing what's right, he said. My cousin told me later that he placed the folder down in the middle of the table. Didn't tear it, didn't throw it, just set it down like a final statement. Jessica is not your tool, he said. She's your daughter, and she deserves more than this. No one argued after that, not out loud. The rest of dinner fizzled into silence and whispers and exits. Half the family left early. Someone started boxing up the ham. My mother retreated to the hallway, stunned and silent for once. Megan went upstairs and didn't come down. And my father, he stayed until the end, helped clear the plates, took the trash out, then drove back to base. December 26th. The sun had barely crested the barracks roof when my phone buzzed again, this time with a call from the front gate. Captain Adams, the voice said, there's a gentleman here asking for you again, says it's urgent. My stomach nodded, not with dread, but something more complex. Anticipation, maybe. Apprehension, hope, cautious and trembling. I threw on my coat and stepped outside. The air was sharp but clear, the kind of winter morning that makes everything feel a little more real. As I rounded the path to the gate, I saw him standing there, my father, not in the same coat he wore the day before, but in full dress uniform. His shoes were polished. His chest bore the faded badges of his younger years. His cover was tucked under one arm, and in the other he carried something I couldn't quite make out at first. He looked different, not just formal, not just prepared, intentional. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He stepped forward, and he saluted, crisp, clean, absolute. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the man who, for most of my life, had turned away from my hurt. The man who let silence grow between us like ivy on a wall. The man who had once watched me board a train in tears and said nothing, now stood before me, saluting me. "Jessica," he said, lowering his arm, voice thick with emotion. "They're furious. Megan, your mother, they think I humiliated them." I said nothing, just waited. "I don't care," he added, "because I finally understand who deserves my pride." He stepped forward and held out what he'd been carrying. It was a frame. Inside it, a copy of my commissioning certificate, signed and dated, and below it, a photo of me at my promotion to captain, smiling beside my unit, the real family. "I went home last night and found this in a box of things you sent," he said. "We never hung it up. We never even acknowledged it. That ends now." I looked down at the frame. My throat tightened. "I want this in the hallway," he said. "Next to mine, side by side, where it always should have been." Tears welled up behind my eyes, not just from the gesture, but from the years of not being seen, not being acknowledged. And now here he was, not just giving me space at the table, but standing behind me, in front of everyone, without apology. He stepped closer. "I'm proud of you," he said, tears in his eyes now. "Not just for your service, but for surviving us." And that's when I lost it. The tears came quiet, steady. Not the kind you hide, not the kind you explain, just release. I straightened my spine, blinked them away, and returned his salute. No words, just that. His eyes glistened, and something passed between us, weightless but permanent. I wasn't just the daughter now. I was equal. He asked if he could come in for breakfast. I told him the mess hall made a mean rehydrated omelet. We sat at a table beneath flickering lights, surrounded by the dull clatter of trays and boots, and shared stories. Not of the past, but of now. The present, the bridge. He didn't try to make things perfect. He didn't excuse what had been done, but he was here. Present, showing up for real. That meant everything. As we finished our coffee, I noticed Amelia watching from across the room. She gave me a small nod, curious, impressed. "Don't get too comfortable," I told my father. "Forgiveness is still a process." "I know," he said, "but I'm not going anywhere." And I believed him. January came in quietly. No fireworks. No resolutions shouted into the cold. Just the soft rhythm of routine and the faint smell of pine needles still lingering in corners of the base. Holiday decorations came down, the mess hall returned to regular rations, and everyone slowly folded back into the comfort of schedules and silence. I liked it that way. I was back in training sessions, running drills with new cadets who reminded me a little too much of myself at 22, eager, serious, and hungry to prove something. Every day, I pushed them just hard enough to make them question what they thought they knew. Not to punish them, to prepare them. Because I knew what it felt like to walk into a storm thinking you'd earned shelter, only to realize you were the one carrying the thunder. One afternoon, as I wrapped up a lesson on field adaptability, a lieutenant ran over with a letter. "Captain Adams, this came in the official mail run. Looks personal." The envelope was thick, cream-colored, handwritten. I didn't open it until later that night, when the hallway was quiet and the world outside my window had turned to frost. It was from my father. Inside was a nomination form for the Charlotte Veterans Leadership Award, a local honor for service members who demonstrated not only military excellence, but also personal integrity in times of adversity. Beneath the printed fields and signatures, his handwriting filled the nomination essay line by line. "Jessica Adams has served her country with honor, but more than that, she has lived with integrity when it mattered most. When no one was watching, when family failed her, when silence would have been easier. She has never asked for recognition. That's precisely why she deserves it. I read the letter 3 times. Each time, my hands trembled less. He hadn't told me he was submitting it. There was no grand reveal, no fishing for approval, just action. Attached to the form was a second sheet, a letter handwritten. Jess, I know a nomination can't fix the past. I don't expect it to. But I want you to know I see you now, all of you. Not just the daughter who served, but the woman who never stopped standing upright, even when we gave you every reason to fall down. You taught me something I should have known a long time ago. Blood doesn't give you the right to someone's trust. You earn that. Every day, this isn't an apology. This is gratitude. Thank you for coming home. Thank you for walking away when it counted. Thank you for showing me what strength really looks like. Love, Dad. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't cry. I just sat there with my palm resting over the paper, letting the warmth of those words sink into places I hadn't known were still cold. There were no follow-ups from Megan, no new messages from my mother, just silence. A bitter, brittle silence that spoke volumes, but I didn't chase it. I didn't need to. Some stories don't get clean endings. Some people stay angry because anger's easier than looking in a mirror. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel responsible for fixing that. I had cadets to train, stories to pass down, a new family, built not from blood but from earned loyalty and shared nights on hard floors. I had a mission now, not just one assigned, but one I'd chosen. And that made all the difference. 1 year later, I stood in front of a classroom full of fourth graders with grass stains on their knees and mismatched socks poking out of untied shoes. A public school in a suburb just outside Charlotte had invited me to speak on Veterans Day. I almost said no, but something about the invitation felt right. Not because I needed the recognition, but because maybe someone in that room needed to hear the truth sooner than I had. They had placed a small American flag on my table, and a poster behind me read in crooked, glittery letters, "Thank you, heroes." I smiled when I saw it. Not because I believed the word hero fit me perfectly, but because I was learning to accept that sometimes to others it might. I talked about discipline, about teamwork, about flying jets and surviving 20-mile marches and the importance of socks in the field. They laughed at the sock part, and then came the questions. A boy in the back asked, "Did you ever fight in a war?" "Yes," I said, "more than one." A girl near the front raised her hand so quickly she almost tipped her chair backward. Her ponytail bobbed when she spoke. "Did your family support you?" It hit harder than I expected. The whole room went still. I looked at her, maybe 9 years old, freckles, hope in her eyes, and realized she wasn't asking about me. Not really. She was asking about her. I didn't flinch, didn't deflect. I just smiled gently and said, "They taught me how to support myself." There was a pause. And then quiet applause, the kind that isn't forced, the kind that starts slow and spreads like people recognizing something not just brave but true. Afterward, the teacher pulled me aside. "They've never been that focused before," she whispered. "Whatever you said, it mattered." I nodded, thanked her, and walked back to my car. There was no dramatic music playing, no sunset in the distance, just a quiet sky and a feeling in my chest like something had finally settled. Cleanly, completely. At home, a stack of letters sat unopened, holiday cards from my team, updates from base. One from the award committee I hadn't even told anyone I won. A small plaque rested on my bookshelf now, but I didn't need to look at it often. It wasn't the object that mattered. It was what it replaced. The need to prove myself to people who never planned to understand me. That part of me was gone. In its place was something sturdier, softer, built not from defense but from choice. Every day since that December, I'd been choosing better boundaries, better peace, better love. And now, as the holidays rolled around again, I wasn't dreading a text or waiting on a fake apology or hoping to be invited into rooms I had outgrown. I was building my own rooms now, ones with real light, ones where I didn't need to ask if I belonged, because I already knew the answer. Thank you for following Jessica's journey. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever outgrown a place that refused to see your worth, drop a comment below. Where did you find your real family? I'd love to hear your story.